You're not in control. You're just well trained. You don't choose most of what you want. You obey it. Your taste, your anger, your principles. Who put them there? Every scroll, every habit, every "this is me." What if it's just a routine pretending to be a personality? Be honest. If your life runs on patterns, where's the choice? Right now, in this exact moment, are you deciding or just doing what you were programmed to do? Most people think control feels like effort. It doesn't. Real control feels invisible. If you had to consciously decide every breath, every step, every blink, you wouldn't survive a day. So your brain automates almost everything. That part is necessary. But somewhere along the way, automation stopped being a tool and became a lifestyle. You don't wake up and decide to check your phone. Your hand moves before the thought finishes forming. You don't carefully reason yourself into most of your moods. Something triggers you, and the mood is already there. That's not weakness. That's how the brain works. The problem is what else got automated without you noticing. Your brain is built to save energy. It prefers shortcuts. Psychologists call these heuristics. In plain English, they're mental habits. Once a behavior works, even once the brain remembers it. If it works again, it becomes a pattern. After enough repetitions, it becomes just how you are. This is how a coping strategy quietly turns into a personality. Think about how you react when someone criticizes you. Do you get defensive? Do you shut down? Do you joke it away? You probably think that's you. It's not. It's a response that once protected you from something. Maybe embarrassment, maybe rejection, maybe feeling small. Your nervous system learned it, and now it runs it automatically. Here's the first uncomfortable twist. Most of what you call yourself is just your brain trying to avoid discomfort as efficiently as possible. Look at your habits, not the big ones, the small, quiet ones. The way you open the same apps without thinking, the way you reach for the same food when you're stressed, the way you replay the same arguments in your head. That's not preference, that's conditioning. And it goes deeper than habits. You probably think your opinions are the result of careful thinking. They're usually the result of repeated exposure. The more often you hear something, the more familiar it feels. The more familiar it feels, the more true it starts to seem. Psychologists call this the mere exposure effect. Your brain confuses repetition with correctness. That's why outrage spreads so easily. That's why fear sticks. That's why certain ideas start to feel obvious even when you can't explain why you believe them. Now add another layer. Your brain hates internal conflict. When your actions don't match your self-image, it creates tension. That tension is called cognitive dissonance, and instead of changing the action, most people change the story they tell themselves. You don't say, "I'm avoiding this because I'm scared." You say, "It's not worth my time." You don't say, "I stayed because I'm afraid to be alone." You say, "It's complicated." Your mind is constantly editing reality to protect your identity. Here's the second twist. You don't just run on patterns, you defend them. Once a behavior becomes part of your story about who you are, you'll fight to keep it, even if it's hurting you. That's why people argue for their limitations. That's why they justify their worst habits. That's why change feels like an attack. To the brain, losing a pattern feels like losing safety. Now let's talk about something even less comfortable. A lot of what you want isn't really about what you want. It's about how you want to be seen, or how you want to feel about yourself. Psychologists call this validation seeking. Your brain is wired to care about status and belonging. That made sense when being rejected by the group meant not surviving. Today, it means something else. It means you buy things to signal something, you post things to get a certain reaction. You shape your personality to fit into rooms, and after a while, you forget you're doing it. You start believing the performance is the person. Here's a quiet but brutal question. How much of your life is built around managing how you're perceived? Your career choices, your relationships, even your values. Third twist, a lot of your decisions are not about happiness. They're about avoiding shame, regret, and uncertainty. The brain prefers a familiar misery to an unfamiliar risk. That's not philosophy. That's neurology. That's why people stay in jobs they hate. That's why they stay with people who drain them. That's why they repeat the same mistakes with different names and faces, and not because they're stupid, because their nervous system recognizes the pattern and says, at least I know how to survive this. And now we need to talk about the environment you're in. Your attention is being trained, not in some sci-fi way, in a very simple way. Whatever holds your attention gets fed back to you. Whatever you react to gets amplified. Over time, your emotional range gets shaped by what you consume. If you're constantly surrounded by conflict, your mind becomes combative. If you're constantly surrounded by comparison, your mind becomes insecure. If you're constantly surrounded by noise, your mind loses the ability to sit still. You don't notice the change because it happens slowly. That's the fourth twist. You're being shaped while you think you're just passing time. So where does that leave the idea of choice? It doesn't mean you have none. It means most of it is buried under layers of habit, fear, and invisible incentives. Real choice is rare. It usually feels uncomfortable. It usually comes with hesitation. And it usually shows up in a very small moment. The moment between a trigger and your reaction. The moment where you notice, I'm about to do the same thing again. Most people never pause there. They stay on autopilot. It's easier, it's quieter, but sometimes if you're paying attention, you catch yourself in the act. And that's a strange feeling. It's not empowering, it's unsettling, because you start to see how much of your life has been running without you. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You don't suddenly become free. You just become aware of how automatic you've been. And that awareness is heavy, because it means the question is no longer philosophical. It's personal. If this felt uncomfortably specific, that's not an accident. Most people sense these patterns in their lives, but they don't have a clear way to look at them. They just feel tired, stuck, or disconnected without knowing exactly why. This channel is for people who want to understand what's actually driving them, even when the answers aren't flattering. If you want more videos like this, you can subscribe. It helps the channel, but more importantly, it tells the algorithm this kind of content matters. If something in this video made you stop and think, leave a like. It helps more than it should. And I'm genuinely curious, what part of human behavior or psychology do you want to explore next? Leave a comment. Read what others are writing. Share this with someone who keeps repeating the same patterns and doesn't know why. Sometimes noticing is the first real interruption.